So if you haven't figured out by now, this is not some random mysterious letter that was just dropped off at my place. By a company called Dear Holmes, and they reached out to me. They saw that we love playing mystery games here, and they said, "Hey, do you want to try our game?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" So I didn't just receive one letter, I actually received multiple letters. But usually the way it works is if you go to their site, you can see they have different packages. And depending on which package you choose, it'll determine how many mysteries you get. And usually they will send you one letter every week. So normally you would have to wait, but they were kind enough to send me all at once. This is probably an older case, but it's all new to me anyways. All right, so I guess we just start with letter 1 now. Let's start by taking out the contents. Oh, I just noticed something right off the bat. So when I hold up the envelope to the light, I can see a word on the letter. Maybe I can try to take a picture and show you guys, but it says classic. And then on the back, it says crest. Maybe that means something. And I know I showed it in the beginning, but it says, please deliver to Wanda W. Clue. And then it just has some fake address here. All right, well, back to the contents. Okay, so it looks like we have 3 papers here. They are all front and back. So I think I read this one first. So this first letter is from John H. Watson. And of course from 221B Baker Street. And the date is the 5th of July, 1887. Esteemed detective, I trust this letter will find you in robust health. Holmes is presently engrossed in aiding a colonel in Reigate, and I find myself needing assistance before his return. Knowing from the acclaim that precedes your reputation of your investigative abilities, it is your expertise I hope to rely on. The urgency that prompts my letter is born from a case most mysterious and disconcerting. Lady Anne and Sir Henry Bellamy of Oakvale Manor are in pursuit of a missing artifact and perhaps a thief. Okay, so we got some names here, Lady Anne and Sir Henry Bellamy. The revered item, a diamond-bearing reliquary containing the finger of Saint Efford, was to be displayed to the public in the Oakvale Chapel. Okay, I think I need to look up this reliquary. Okay, so Wikipedia says it's basically a container for relics. And then some images show like they look really fancy. In this case, the relic being a finger. Alas, it has inexplicably vanished. Lady Anne is disconsolate, for doubt has darkened her husband's view of her. Okay, so the husband blames the wife. Sir Henry is, as she suspects, wary of her, but also fears for his life, claiming the artifact is cursed. Is this Jujutsu Kaisen or something? If you are willing to help, then please first regard the enclosed missive sent yesterday by Lady Bellamy. So Oxford says missive is a letter, especially a long or official one. I have a feeling I'm going to be looking up a lot of words here. Sir Bellamy has also conveyed additional particulars today, which I shall transcribe for you on the reverse of this letter. Once you have reviewed those documents, I would appreciate your thoughts on several pertinent queries weighing upon my mind. So now it looks like we have some adjectives here. Number 1. By what means did the saint's finger make its departure from the confines of the Oakvale Chapel? And who might have been so audacious as to abscond with it? I think there's a typo here. Number 2, in what undisclosed location might the sacred reliquary now lie? Yeah, so I guess it's the whole thing that's missing, not just the finger. And number 3, cursed or not, is Sir Henry's life, as he claims, in peril? Know that I will forward additional correspondence as it arrives. However, should you conjure any theories or manners of addressing the Bellamy's unsolved problems, I ask that you write to the following address. Our American associates can wire any messages to Baker Street so that I can act accordingly. And then they give you an address here. I think it's part of the game if you want to mail in your theories. It sounds fun, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to write down all my theories, and then I believe at the end they give you a solution. I assure you, your erudition makes your involvement indispensable, and Holmes, I need not remind you, has faith in you. Okay, I think for some words I'm just going to rely on context here. Still, once he returns to London, he will review the facts and send a duplicate of his own solution. So yeah, I think I will see Sherlock Holmes' solution at the end. This will be in approximately 1 month's time, except for me, I have all the letters. In the meantime, I am grateful for your swift attentiveness to this matter. Your insights are anticipated with great eagerness, and I harbor no doubt that together we shall illuminate the shadowed corridors of this mystery. Humbly yours, John H. Watson. Awesome. So, looks like we have something from Lady Bellamy and something from Sir Henry. So, like they mentioned, on the back side of the first letter is a letter from Sir Henry Bellamy, and then the other documents are from Lady Anne. So, I'm looking at the dates of the letters, and it looks like Lady Anne wrote hers on the 4th of July, and Sir Henry wrote his on the 5th. I'm thinking to read them in chronological order, so I'm going to read Lady Anne's first. I might stop every now and then to take some notes, and you guys don't forget to take notes as well. Just as a reminder, we're trying to find the means of how it was stolen and who stole it, of course, and then the current location of the reliquary. And finally, we're trying to see if Sir Henry's life is really in danger. All right, so Lady Anne's letter, Oakvale Manor, Bournewood, Surrey. So it's actually written to Sherlock Holmes, but apparently he's too busy to solve it, so here we are. Dearest Mr. Sherlock Holmes, my sister became an admirer of yours when she learned of the awful mess involving the Rylots some years ago and your part in bringing forth a resolution. Since then, I have heard countless tales of your keen wit and fine sleuthing, to use my sister's own words. It is this reputation that brings me to you, sir, for I implore you to assist me and to relieve me of a distress that is almost unbearable. A relic of great historical value has been stolen from our estate, and my husband, Sir Henry Bellamy, holds me responsible, not only for the missing relic, but for the misfortune he ardently believes will befall him as a result. The object, his family claims, bears a terrible curse, and Henry blames it for his recent illness, which he fears will result in his death. Lest you think I am hysterical, allow me to describe in calm and measured words what has occurred. Okay, so right off the bat, we know why Henry might believe it's cursed, because his family has told him so, and apparently he has a recent illness. Our manor, which is called Oakvale, is perched upon a high hill just west of Tilford, overlooking Black Lake and Waverley Abbey. Okay, so we have a brief description of the environment here. If this seems important, then I might come back to this, but for now I'm just going to move on. The Bellamy family is an old one, and among the items in the family's collection of historical oddities is a reliquary known as the Saint's Finger. It is a narrow silver cylinder just 2 inches long, decorated with a number of diamonds, and is said to contain the right forefinger of one Saint Efford. Okay, so we have a description of the reliquary now. So being just 2 inches long is very small. Some of the pictures I've seen were like huge boxes, but this is a cylinder that's only 2 inches long. They don't say how wide it is, but since they describe it like a cylinder, I don't imagine it being too wide, at least not wider than 2 inches. So probably enough just to hold like a finger, right? Over a month ago, I suggested to my husband that he might allow the Saint's Finger to be placed on display to help draw attention to an event for the Farnham Ladies Guild. I am a member, and to play our part in poor relief, we are hosting an authentic medieval bazaar. Sir Henry was most reluctant at first. There is no need to place our family's sacred object before the vulgar masses who might try to steal it, he snorted, but I kept pleading my case. So it seems like he's not too fond of the poor, or at least doesn't trust them. I explained that if enough people attend and contribute funds, the guild will be able to fund an almshouse for Tilford, not just a new one in Farnham. Okay, what is an almshouse? A house built originally by a charitable person or organization for poor people to live in. Okay, so this is like a charity event, I guess. People will be thrilled at an opportunity to see the Saint's Finger, and even if they don't enroll their names in the subscription list, they are sure to bring along gifts of kindness, I told him. The Bellamy name would be remembered with dignity and honor. To this, he had a more favorable response, though he insisted we should receive a percentage of the sales for displaying my family's artifact. Okay, so he's not only a jerk, but he's greedy as well. After much debate, he acquiesced to my idea on 2 conditions. The first, that I would strongly advocate for the guild's new almshouse in Farnham to be named after his father, Harrison Bellamy II. The second, that the relic would be displayed only within the walls of Oakvale Chapel, a confined ancient structure which stands at the end of a narrow path, just a stone's throw behind the manor house. Okay, so now we have a description of the chapel. So it's not too far from the manor, and we got a description earlier that the manor is on top of a hill and overlooking a lake and Waverley Abbey. So now we know that there is a narrow path that leads to the chapel. He felt it could be safely kept under watch in that moldy place, which has but one heavy wooden door, to which he carries the only key. Okay, so not only a narrow path, but only one entrance. Since coming to this agreement, I have been preparing the chapel for the relic with my maids, Flora and Jane. All right, so we have two more people here now. Yesterday morning, I instructed them to clean it thoroughly and to fashion a pillow for the object out of purple satin. Just before luncheon, I inspected their work in the chapel. They were covered in dust, for the chapel had not been used in almost 20 years. It contains nothing except a rough stone altar, a few wooden benches, and one large tapestry depicting the judgment of Solomon. I think the tapestry has been there since the time of King Henry VIII and all his wives. It is so faded and moth-eaten. The girls had swept and dusted every nook and had brought in a tall pair of brass candelabras to provide some light and decor. I was satisfied with the state of the chapel, so I fetched my husband to inspect the premises for himself. He did so, but not without his complaints. I suppose this will be safe enough, though I worry. The windows, he grumbled, pointing to the round leaded panes circling the top of the chapel. Okay, possible entry point here. Dearest, I told him, the windows are so high upon the wall and no larger than dinner plates. He considered this for some moments before reluctantly giving his final blessing to display the item. Okay, so that's interesting. Even if they're high, there might be ways to get around that, but the size is what you cannot get around. They are no larger than dinner plates. Later that afternoon, we conducted a simple ceremony and introduced the relic to its temporary home. My husband removed it from its usual place, the trunk in our bedroom, and I cleaned and polished it so that it looked almost new. I handed the relic back to my husband and the entire staff, our maids and our 2 footmen, along with our butler, Jenkins, our cook, Mrs. Jenkins, our cook, and Teddy. Wait, is this another typo? Let me try reading that again. So it says the entire staff, our maids, and our 2 footmen, along with our butler, Jenkins, our cook, Mrs. Jenkins, our cook, and Teddy, our little page boy. Okay, so I think our cook is the typo, the second one. Marched behind us to the chapel. Even Cato, our faithful mastiff, trotted along. Is that a dog? Yeah, it is a dog. Okay, this is quite a list of people here. So there's the 2 maids, the 2 footmen, the butler, and the cook, and then the dog. Jane had earlier presented Jarvis, our first footman, with the pillow, which he carried high above his head as Eddie, our second footman, made an admirable effort of playing the trumpet. Jarvis laid the satin pillow upon the altar, and then we watched as my husband delicately placed the relic in its place of honor. How the saint's finger twinkled, for the light was coming in from the windows on the western side of the chapel. Wait, there's more windows? So there's windows on the top of the chapel. Those are the round ones that are like dinner plates. And now there is light coming in from windows on the western side of the chapel. So the light was coming in from the windows on the western side of the chapel, making a halo around the blessed object. We sang a hymn and departed. My husband locked the door, stored the key in his pocket, and Jarvis and Eddie took their place as guards outside the chapel. The next day, I awoke with plans to demonstrate the relic to the Ladies' Guild, and soon after began offering viewings of the chapel to potential donors in anticipation of the bazaar. Sir Henry had slept fitfully that night and was already at the breakfast table when I rose, where he regaled the maids, even our cook and Teddy, with tales of his nightmares and the phantoms which had tormented him in his sleep. It was frightful, he said to them. I was lying in bed, gasping for air as if some demon had his claw about my throat. I called out to Saint Efford for aid, but saw him shake his head and turn his back to me. I screamed, and the demon's claws drew tighter. I awakened only seconds before I would have perished. I wonder if this wasn't a dream and someone was actually there. I did not care for his gloomy tone, but some of the staff was moved. Jane, one of our maids, looked anxiously to Flora, the other. Indeed, the teacup she had filled trembled before she said it before my husband. I am sorry that you slept so poorly, I said to him. But all is well now, Jane suddenly spoke. Do you think there are spirits in the house, Sir Henry? Flora hushed her as Mrs. Jenkins interjected. I have plenty of bad dreams. It's the beds here. I've told you, Sir Henry, hard as a rack. Jarvis, always hoping to provoke, opined that it was probably indigestion if he had last night's dinner, Mrs. Jenkins. Got him. Enough with the foolery, my husband snapped. The relic is not a laughing matter. He removed his serviette and demanded that the two of us go out to inspect the saint's finger. Jarvis and Eddie were standing at attention by the door, with Cato, our mastiff, at their feet as we approached the chapel. They offered my husband a snappy salute and swore that nothing had disturbed them during the night. Well, I shall see, just to be sure, Sir Henry said, turning the key. The hinges groaned as he shoved the massive door open. We four filed into the chapel and were met with the most startling revelation. That it was gone. Atop the purple satin pillow was nothing beyond a small depression where the saint's finger had been placed the afternoon before. My husband began to shake his fists and curse. It's lost! Now all is lost! Lost, dear Efford! What have I done? I started to feel faint as I realized it was truly gone and staggered back. Only half conscious, I tripped over one of the benches and tumbled to the floor. Eddie scooped me up and carried me back to the house. Once we were inside, I asked him if he had told us the truth. He grew very red in the face and swore that no one had opened the door all night and that he had not heard nor seen anyone on the lawn or creeping around the manor. Why did he turn very red? After I spoke with Eddie, he returned to the chapel, and I followed a few minutes later after I had sufficiently composed myself. I found my husband glaring at the first footman, Jarvis, who was in the process of confessing he had snuck away to fetch some food from the kitchen late at night. Jarvis said that when he returned, Eddie was snoring on the ground, curled up with the mastiff. Both of them useless curs. On hearing this, Sir Henry began heaping abuse upon Eddie for sleeping at his post. He was on his knees in tears, so I threw my arms around him and attempted to calm the situation. So this is probably why he turned red, because he fell asleep. Even if Eddie did fall asleep, I offered, a thief would not have been able to open the door without awakening him. Isn't that so, Eddie? He nodded, accepting my excuse. My husband merely stomped away to question the other servants, and Eddie retreated to his chamber, clearly shaken. Jarvis remained at his post with Cato, snickering. He has been my husband's servant for several years, and frankly, I do not like him, nor do I care for his antics. The man seems to constantly play jokes on the others when they should all be working, and I have heard rumors of his bad character. So is Jarvis the same one who insulted the cook? Yeah, so he's the troublemaker here. Suffice it to say, he is a bad drunk. With regard to Eddie, I do not believe that he would intentionally lie to me. He's a strong and kind young man whom I convinced my husband to hire. He is very loyal, and I cannot imagine him stealing the relic. Okay, I mean, it's always the one you least suspect. When the other staff was asked about their evenings, little else came to light. Flora claimed she had gone to bed at about 10 and heard nothing in the nighttime. Jane claimed she had also retired early and slept peacefully through the night. Mrs. Jenkins said she had been reading some theater magazines near the fire and dozed off close to 11. And Jenkins said he roamed the house, as I always do, making sure everything's in order. I retired just before 11. So that Jenkins is the butler. The page boy, who lives with his mother on the outskirts of the property, was polishing silver in our kitchen until late in the evening. Oh, this is another character, the page boy. He left home to his cottage as Jenkins was retiring and saw nothing extraordinary. though his tale of unnatural cries had disturbed half the staff. Unnatural cries? Okay, before that, this is like a lot of information because this is our everybody's alibis. 'Twas as if something in a nightmare, I believed. He hesitated. Go on, I ordered. I believed it a sign that death was on its way, so I ran home. Almost stumbled and cut my knee. Jane began to cry. See, it's what the medium told us. I won't stay in the manor if it's filled with shades and wraiths and... Flora held her hand. Stop being a flighty fool. Turning to me, she added, me and Jane, we went to the fair last week and the fortune teller, she was just trying to frighten us, I'm sure. Jane started again. It's because we live in an old house. It's common in places like this, she said, especially being so close to Black Lake. Miss Fortuna says it has a powerful energy. I would have never thought. So Jane is somewhat convinced that this place is cursed or haunted, and Flora's trying to keep her level-headed. This was paired with a long sigh from Flora. Jenkins held onto his waistband as he proclaimed, it would appear that the wraiths have also made off with my braces. It was then that I dispatched Teddy to fetch Inspector Mercer, good man, impressive investigator from the village. Seems like the finger wasn't the only thing that was lost. I'm not sure what they mean by braces. Is it for teeth, or are they talking about something else? So we might have another character, Inspector Mercer. Of course, our unique exhibition has been suspended indefinitely, and in the meantime, the inspector has taken our statements and examined the chapel. But I fear that he alone may not be able to uncover the truth quickly enough. The only finding so far has been a broken window in the chapel, although even my husband noted it was not a great cause for alarm. What? Why wouldn't it be? The window is 15 feet above the ground and too small for even an infant to wiggle through. Okay, so these are the windows on the ceiling. They uncovered no muddy tracks or prints on the ground either, even though it had rained through the night. And at Jarvis's suggestion, Inspector Mercer sounded all the walls and the floor but found no trace of any hidden passage. The walls outside of the chapel, they have verified, are sheer and slick, nor were there footprints or any traces of damage where a hook or ladder might have been employed. And so, I beg your help. Okay, so they're basically saying there's no traces, no evidence, except for a broken window. My husband blames me for the loss of the holy item and is convinced that I am deceiving him. He has accused me of unspeakable things, of making the relic disappear because I wished him dead. Yet it is all nonsense. How could I have made the item vanish when I was beside him all the time? You would think he believes me to be a witch, the way he rants. If there's anything I can provide you with, be it money or otherwise, to expedite your attention to this case, please let me know. Until then, I leave you with some final bits of information which should help you understand the importance of the saint's finger and my husband's somewhat ill-proportioned fear of losing it. As stated, the object is said to hold the finger of Saint Effort. He was a pious cleric who served as the Bellamy family chaplain from 1234 to 1259. The day of his death, he was set upon the brigands on a path close to the manor, and his cries brought the Bellamy men to his aid, but by the time they reached him, he had succumbed to his wound. His finger, said to have been severed by a villain's sword, was retrieved from the ground by the youngest Bellamy brother, Wilfred Bellamy I. Efford was buried in the village church the next morning. His finger, however, was enclosed in silver and retained in the Oakvale Chapel. Over generations, it was said that if the relic should ever be lost or stolen, great misfortune would befall the Bellamy family. And indeed, during the Regency, the item was stolen, and while it was absent, 5 heirs perished of plague. My husband's father retrieved the relic in 1840, just before he too was struck down by fever at a young age. I sometimes think the saint remains offended, for sadness has continued to stalk our halls, and the Bellamy fortunes did not flourish even after the relic's return. My husband's mother passed in 1852 of consumption, and his only sibling, his elder brother, perished in a riding accident that same year, while he was a student at Oxford. Sir Henry's last wife died at an early age as well, before being able to gift Sir Henry with an heir. and God has not sent fit to grant us children either. You will now better understand the extent to which my husband, a great believer in curses, is now inconsolable. Please, Mr. Holmes, you must advise me, and soon. Sincerely, Lady Anne Bellamy. All right, well, before digging any further, I think I want to hear what the husband has to say. So I'm actually not sure if just looking through the first envelope or the contents of the first envelope, we're going to have enough information to solve this. They did give 3 objectives, but yeah, I think we have to go through the rest of the letters. So I'll at least try to make something out of the information that we have so far. All right, so our letter from Sir Henry Bellamy. Dear Mr. Holmes, it is with gratitude that I learned my wife wrote to you concerning the dreadful situation at Oakville. My own inquiries have led nowhere, and the police inspector assigned to our case is giving it little regard, so I too am writing to you. My hysterical wife has no doubt wearied you with a recitation of the events that occurred at our manor, yet I insist that you give proper weight to my observations, for as befits the manly eye, they give the clearest sense of what has befallen. Wow, what a jerk. When I allowed the reliquary to be displayed for the good of the poor, I knew it was folly, a tempting of fate. Yet I relented because Annie pleaded, and indeed claimed it was an act of charity. Now it has been stolen, and I fear that the culprit is undoubtedly someone close to me. Please consider the following observations. First of all, I do not believe that the key to the Oakville Chapel could have been used for this theft. After locking the saint's finger inside, Annie and I shared a meal as the sun set, and I retired for the evening. A spoonful of Ayer's sarsaparilla, which has made me sleepy of late, and the sound of rain had me snoring in seconds, but nobody could have taken the key without disturbing me. In fear of that very possibility, I had bound it tightly to my wrist with a cord. Had anybody attempted to unwind the cord, they would have woken me, and had they not, they surely would have done so when attempting to replace the key that night. The latter would have had to occur, for I woke with it still tightly bound to my wrist. Its impression remained for nearly 12 hours. Okay, so, I didn't think the key was used, so we'll see. My second observation concerns the inspector who visited my manor. The inspector, Andrew Mercer, did nothing but assault me with questions. Okay, so this is Inspector Mercer, same guy. My head still aches. He wished to know the age of the chapel and the relic, and wanted to know every detail about the saint's finger. Was it merely tin and paste? Truly made of silver and diamonds? And so on. I answered each question, telling him that the Bellamy family has been here for 700 years, and that the gems were genuine. Then he asked of the artifact's insurance, and if I was looking forward to it. I could no longer restrain myself from defending my name. I am the lord of this manor, not a conniving thief, came my answer. And this is a grave matter. If the reliquary is not returned, I will perish, just as my brother did. On hearing this, he chuckled. I suggest, the inspector concluded, smoothing his mustache, you offer a reward then. Rewards, well, money can work wonders in these cases. As rotten as my finances are, I agreed and asked how much I should offer. He shrugged. Perhaps 1/3 of its value. I told him absolutely not, but I agreed to a £75 reward. That may do, he said. The nature of your item, with the finger and all, would pose quite the challenge for thieves when it comes to selling it or disposing of it anyways. After this, he offered an apology with a smirk on his face and took his leave. I guess Sir Henry's not the only greedy one here. The inspector hardly acknowledged my pleas to scrutinize the staff and my wife. He suspects only my footman, Jarvis, but as I told him, the other footman, Eddie, is a reliable simpleton. He can follow instructions well, and is also my wife's cousin, perhaps she mentioned that, which is why I hired the boy. Oh, she didn't say anything about being related, right? No, just that she convinced him to hire him. Okay, so that is one thing that she kept from or didn't share, but the husband knows, so it would just be a secret to Sherlock. Okay, so wife's cousin, perhaps she mentioned that, which is why I hired the boy. I cannot help but fear that they know more about the missing relic than they are letting on, and I must expose the truth before I am in the grasp of St. Ephed's curse. Already I can feel my heart pounding and my face is bathed in sweat. Mr. Holmes, I am willing to pay your fees, any fees, for consultation and detection of the criminal, providing, of course, that you are reasonable and that they yield verifiable results. Do not delay in responding. Sir Henry Bellamy. Okay, so yeah, it definitely looks like we are not going to have close to enough information from just the first letter. So I think what I'll do is that there are 4, at least in this set. So maybe 2 per video. So let's go ahead and open up letter 2. All right, here we go. All right, let's see what we got here. We have 3 more pages. 2 of them are front and back. And this all seems to be written by the inspector, Andrew Mercer. And it's on the 6th, so the next day. I might try to go through this one a little bit faster and then take some notes afterwards. Dear Mr. Holmes, allow me to introduce myself. Jehovah? I am Inspector Andrew Mercer. Yesterday, as I believe you know, I was called to investigate the theft of a valuable artifact at Oakville Manor. You have already been informed of the nature of this strange object, I am told. However, I wonder if you might review my records as you consider this case. I wager you would value information coming from someone less personally involved in the matter, and I am sure you will concur our chances of resolving this debacle are heightened by a united effort. I am a native of Tilford and have known of Sir Bellamy since my childhood. Oakville, now his manor, is situated just between my birthplace and Farnham, some miles south of the latter. He has never been a popular figure. His station in life to those around here implies a duty to charity, and he plainly disregards that. I have also known Lady Anne for years. We were playmates as children. A gentler, kinder woman has never lived. It was surprising to learn that Sir Bellamy suspects her in the theft. When I was first called to Oakville and told of the stolen relic, I expected him to demand a search of his servants and perhaps their quarters. Instead, I was met with a rather precise handful of theories. The H-man is certain that he is cursed and that Anne has somehow orchestrated the robbery as a means of killing him. If it is not found, Bellamy told me, Efford's curse will be upon me. Once that occurs, there is no telling how it will manifest itself. But one thing is certain, I will soon perish. He paused. The object must be venerated, protected, and the thief must be severely punished. This is an attempt on my life. Hearing this, I grew doubtful of both his sanity and his own motivations. So I questioned him as much as I could before interviewing others and inspecting the premises, including the site of the alleged theft. My work brought forth a number of telling details. Okay, so that's probably why he was asking him a ton of questions, because he was looking very suspicious. My first subjects, after speaking with the Bellamys, were the lads, Jarvis and Edward, who had been assigned to guard the treasure the night of July 4th. Both claimed they saw and heard nothing until I questioned them more aggressively. It was then Edward who confessed that he had fallen asleep at the door to the chapel, but only because Jarvis left me alone to go have some bread and cheese. He didn't even bring me any when he came back. Jarvis turned red in the face and swore at his fellow footman when he said this. Even from a short distance, I was able to sniff Jarvis's breath, alcohol, and see the broken blood vessels in his nose. When I told him his breath smelled of spirits, he drew back and said, "What of it? You're not the one on sentry duty with a half-wit." Very well, I thought to myself, and simply thanked the two. My probing later uncovered a bottle of scotch, nearly empty, in some shrubbery in the woods behind the chapel. I know from Anne that Sir Bellamy is not a drinking man, so I presume the bottle is in fact the bread and cheese that Jarvis told his associate he was fetching. The footman must be grateful that Bellamy's senses are half failing him. Following my conversation with the guards, I was led to the scullery, where I spoke briefly with the butler and his wife, the cook, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins. They are a quarrelsome pair and had nothing significant to contribute, though the butler wished to report another robbery, that of his best pair of braces. As he is a man of ponderous girth, this is no doubt a hardship for him, but I informed him it would not be a case I would undertake at present. Okay, so now, yeah, I'm thinking it's not like braces for your teeth. It must be something for his legs. On hearing this, he lowered his voice. I do not wish to insinuate anything or incriminate anybody, but I feel as if I should mention this to you. Mr. Jenkins leaned close to me. The night before the saint's finger was taken, most everyone retired fairly early, the rain and all. But I was awake until late, and it seems I wasn't the only one, he hissed. When I was making myself tea, just after retiring, it must have been 11. It was in the kitchen, and I suddenly heard a dreadful plop, plop, plop. So I armed myself with the biggest ladle I could find and poked my head out the door. Mrs. Jenkins held onto his arms as he spoke. Lo and behold, Flora, drenched but oddly happy, clutching a croquet ball in one hand and a small rag in the other. She was quietly trying to dry the path behind her as she crept to her chamber. I'm not saying she did anything awful, but you must admit it was a mighty unusual sight. According to Mr. Jenkins, she proceeded to her quarters and remained there until morning. It's strange is all, don't you think? My braces go missing just as Flora starts to act strangely. I responded, indeed, I'll be sure to inquire, then made my leave to examine the chapel. Interesting. So she returns at 11 though. So if something was done before 11, I don't even know when they think it was stolen. We also don't know what time the events happened for the footman, like when Jarvis left to get bread and cheese or when Eddie fell asleep. My initial thoughts is something's going on between Flora and Jenkins. I don't know. And Flora is the more level-headed one because Jane is the one who believes that the place is haunted and the thing is cursed. From Lady Anne's letter, Flora said that she went to bed at 10, but we now know that's a lie because she came back at 11 here. Although I am vaguely familiar with Oakville Manor, I had never set foot in what appears to be its loneliest structure. It is a sad place, lacking decoration except for a stone altar, 2 wooden benches, a pair of brass candelabra, and one faded but quite substantial tapestry on the eastern wall. Okay, so now we know that there is a window on the western wall and the tapestry on the eastern wall. Maybe they used it to climb down? I don't know. No stained glass or murals relieve the gloom. The door is the only entrance and exit, save for 6 leaded windows across the eastern and western walls. Oh, so there's windows on both east and west. But they were just saying that the light was coming in from the western windows earlier. But those are high above, perhaps some 17 feet from the ground. Despite a very careful inspection with my magnifying glass, a procedure I have learned from studying your methods, he's talking about Sherlock, I detected no evidence that the door had been forced open recently, nor had the lock been tampered with in any manner. One small window on the western side was broken. Oh, so it was one of the windows not on the ceiling, but on the western side. So it was broken apparently between the time they placed the saint's finger in the chapel and the time it was stolen. The other windows were all intact. I wondered if someone might have climbed in through the window and taken the relic, so I had Mr. Jenkins fetch us a ladder and inspected the window from both within and outside of the chapel. Most importantly, I observed that the window was not much larger than a serving dish. Oh, okay, so I thought I read somewhere that there were windows on the ceiling, but maybe they're just referring to these windows on the eastern and western walls. And the windows are 17 feet from the ground. Not even a thin child could have squeezed through, especially with much of the shattered glass still sticking up from the sill like vicious teeth. Beyond that, there was no hint of blood or footprints, nothing indicating passage through the window. Nor was there any dubious damage to the stone walls beneath the windows on either side. That is to say, I do not think anybody attempted to scale the chapel to reach the window. After abandoning the chapel, I spoke with the maids, as Lady Anne had informed me that they cleaned the place prior to the saint's finger being placed on the altar. Both are young, between 18 and 20 years of age. One, Jane, is unusually tall. She competes with the butler in height, and he, in turn, is at least 6 feet tall. Okay, so Jane is pretty tall, as well as the butler, who they're both about 6 feet. I started by asking if either of the two had been alone in the chapel at any point in the last week or so. No, sir, we always work together, said the older one, Flora. I then asked if they had found anything unusual while preparing the chapel for the ceremony. Jane answered, A lot of dust. We had 20 years of cobwebs to clean out. Flora nodded and spoke. According to Mrs. Jenkins, Sir Bellamy hasn't used the chapel since his first marriage. The taller one paced as she added, I was afraid we'd find something dreadful, she continued, but nothing. It was rather dull. We did find some glass the day the relic went missing, and a few leaves, but the worst work was beating out that tapestry. I am still sneezing. She gave a nervous glance at Flora as she fixed her mess of orange hair. My face, it was so covered in dirt I could barely see. Had to wash it before we could finish. Okay, and it's kind of interesting that they mentioned this orange hair. So I'm going to take a note of that. So it says she gave a nervous glance at Flora as she fixed her mess of orange hair. So Jane has orange hair. And I'm wondering why she gave a nervous look. Then you were not always together, I observed. She was only gone for a minute. Oh, is that why she gave a nervous look? Because she had to go wash up. Flora said firmly, I swept up the leaves while she was away. Jane agreed. But you saw no footprints? No marks where someone might have entered? They shook their heads. Then Jane spoke with a timid squeak. Don't you think it could have been Saint Effort himself who took it? His spirit, I mean? Don't you think he's been unhappy all those years in heaven? You can't play the harp without all your fingers, Flora. Oh no. What a silly goose you are, Flora snapped. I had to concur, and as I considered my subsequent inquiry, I heard a long whistle outside and was reminded of the Bellamy's hound. The mastiff outside, I said. I presume him to be a good watchdog. Did he bark that night or alert you to anything in the days before the artifact vanished? Jane said, no, then shot a glance at Flora. Everything has been quiet here for a week. No visitors. Wait, why are they so weird? Why are they so awkward right now? And when you have been off to town on errands, you have seen no one lurking about the grounds, anything like that? They shook their heads. And there are too many of us not to notice a stranger, said Flora. Jane and I, along with Eddie, Jarvis, and Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins, have quarters in the house. Even Teddy resides just down the hill in a cottage with his mother. They barely get by. Knowing what I know of the manor, I would have to agree with her assessment. A stranger would have been noticed by someone within moments of loitering, unless they were entirely concealed. After this, I dismissed Jane and asked Flora if she would speak to me in private for a moment. I asked her of what Mr. Jenkins had told me, and she did not hesitate to answer. Oh, poor Jenkins. His age betrays him, she laughed. He must be thinking of a different day is all. It rained a lot last week, and see, there was one day the staff had been playing games on the lawn. You can ask him, and I realized very late that we had left some things outdoors. I knew Sir Bellamy would be cross if he found out, so even though it was middle of the night, I ran out to gather it all. This, I noted. Is that the truth? I'll at least take a note of her side of this story. Afterwards, I took another quick walk around the chapel, where I encountered the butler again, and later the page boy. The ground around the chapel had been badly churned by Sir Bellamy and his clumsy footmen, but I found no evidence that somebody attempted an entry, by means of ladder or otherwise. I thought perhaps a thief might have climbed the oak standing next to the building to access the roof, but a study of its branches assures me that it would be far too risky of a leap. Mr. Jenkins, who was now tending to the hedges near the chapel, saw me staring at it and offered to bring me a ladder again. Here you are, sir, he said only minutes later, positioning it. The slate roof was sound and sturdy upon inspection, though I gave the butler a fright when I slipped past one of the ladders rung on my descent. This occurred precisely as Teddy, the page boy, strolled out of the chapel, and he was quick to give a hearty "ha ha." Just as quickly, Mr. Jenkins scolded him. I told you to keep out of there, boy. The page boy crossed his arm. I was having another look, sir, to see if I could find a clue for the detective. What if there's a reward? I grinned at him. And did you find anything? He kicked the dirt. No, sir, I found nothing but a feather, which I put in my cap. Ooh, that is evidence. He doffed said cap and showed it to me eagerly. You know, they say that magpies are signs that spirits are nearby. Jane told me so. She said there are lots of sorts of spirits. Could it be that a shade took the relic? I could not help but let out a laugh in response. One should expect no more from superstitious servants, I suppose. I told the boy to run along, and he skipped away to a boulder between the house and chapel, where he sat and remained scribbling on a pad. Okay, I'm just going to take a note of this feather. Don't know if it's really that important. It could explain the broken window, maybe, that a bird flew in there. For my part, I made my way to Sir Bellamy's study to announce the conclusion of my interviews and my departure. Hearing me approach, he called me inside and asked that I shut the door behind me. He seemed agitated, ashen. After I shut the door, he called me to his side and thrust a medicine bottle into my hand. "It is strange that I have slept so deeply this week," he said, "and I have had terrible dreams. Take this and have the chemist test it." It was a bottle of Ayer's sarsaparilla, which is now in the hands of my friend and an excellent chemist, Charles Withern. If there's anything amiss with it, you will be first to know after me. With the bottle in hand, I asked Sir Bellamy where he had obtained it. "My doctor," he croaked, "said it was a healthful tonic and that it would make me feel more vigorous." As I examined the bottle, he added, "I kept it in my chamber, always. Only my wife knows where it is." He then insisted that I speak with Lady Anne, as well as the footman Edward, or Eddie, I suppose. I informed him that I had already interviewed both and that I had all the information I would be needing at that stage. He demanded again that I interrogate them, noting that time was of the essence. "I am most aware, sir," I told him. Then, taking inspiration from the page boy, I offered him the idea of posting a reward for his treasure. He begrudgingly agreed, but ended our conversation abruptly shortly afterwards when I broached the matter of the Saint's Fingers insurance. This, of course, compelled me to visit another place prior to returning to the station. So the inspector is definitely suspecting Sir Henry, wanting to see what this insurance is, how much he would gain from losing it. Upon leaving the manor, I called upon Sir Bellamy's solicitor in the village, Mr. Connor Marlowe, and inquired whether the relic was insured. Knowing he had no legal obligation to answer me as of yet, I was reluctant, but Marlowe was pleased to speak to me. He said Sir Henry Bellamy has felt no obligation to pay his bills of late, so I feel no obligation to harbor his secrets. Saying those words, he rummaged through a cabinet and snatched a piece of paper, handing it to me. "The Saint's Finger is insured for nearly £2,000. Good sir, I am finding it difficult to believe that Bellamy is truly angry or in fear of his life. Rather, he must act offended lest the insurance company fail to pay him. Oakville is a dilapidated property in great need of repair, and Sir Bellamy is similarly past his age. If he can no longer afford to fix broken windows or replace tattered tapestry, then perhaps his curse comes from a more earthly origin. And there the case lies. The Oakville Chapel, I have no doubt, was locked through the night on which the Saint's Finger vanished. No person could have entered it unless through the door, which was supposed to have been barred by both Edward and the Mastiff until the early hours. The other footman, who is not fond of his fellow guard, was willing to confirm this. Still, I wonder if therein lies the solution. This other footman, Jarvis, may be lying about more than his penchant for scotch. Yeah, maybe he met up with Flora? I don't know. Further, Sir Bellamy's squawking about the curse seems to me like madness. I am a man of science, Mr. Holmes. I do not ascribe to his or his servants' superstitions. Rather, in light of his statements against Lady Anne, I theorize the old sinner might be trying to endanger his good wife's name and garner a precious sum from his insurance company, all in one fell swoop. Please come to Oakville if you can, or at least tell me if my theory of the case is the correct one. I hope to put this nonsense to rest. Sincerely, Inspector Andrew Mercer. Okay, I mean, it sounds like a pretty convincing theory. The only things I'm really unsure about is who to trust between Flora and the butler, Mr. Jenkins. But the butler really has no reason to lie about that. It is possible that he could be mistaken, but there's no mention of him being old and kind of forgetful. On the other hand, Flora has a lot more reasons to lie because she already gave an alibi, and this would definitely conflict with that. Also, on top of her like wanting to hide something. They also mentioned that it rained, so it's very likely that footprints could have been washed away. And we're also left with how did they enter the chapel. The only things they've noticed is a broken window, which of course is 17 feet off the ground and the size of a plate dish. But when I mentioned that the boy found the feather, it is possible that a bird is the cause of the broken window. Could someone have trained a bird to snatch the finger? I don't know. That would be my best theory because there's no need for a ladder. There's no need for footprints. The bird just swoops in, grabs it, and flies out. Surely you can train a bird to do that, right? Then the question becomes, who would train a bird to do that? I mean, there's plenty of reasons to steal it, right? It's probably worth a lot of money. The inspector did mention that it would be hard to sell though, so it kind of gives more reason for Sir Henry to steal it so that he can claim the insurance. But I don't know. I think anyone could have stolen it at this point. Although Jane is possibly deathly afraid of it, so I don't know if she would want it. There's kind of that weird interaction between Jane and Flora when the inspector is talking to them. It could be that she knows something that Flora is keeping a secret, and that secret could be something between Flora and Jarvis. So yeah, after 2 letters, I think that's all I really have at this point. To me, the strongest motive does seem to be Sir Henry to get the insurance money, and the simplest means would be a bird flying in through the window and snatching it. That'll do it for this video. So in the next one, I'll go ahead and open up letters 3 and 4, and that should hopefully solve this case. If you're enjoying it so far, give this video a like, consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. If you want to help support us, there's a QR code right here and a link in the description to buy me a coffee. Any amount will definitely help out. If you like all things puzzles and mysteries, go check out the channel, and again, consider subscribing, and see you in the next video.